The stagecoach door opened and Caleb Boone's life shattered in an instant. He'd ordered a wife. What stepped into the snow were three ghosts, a woman with hollow eyes and two children so thin their bones showed through their clothes. They weren't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to bring anyone. The contract said one woman, practical arrangement, no complications. But complications had arrived anyway, shivering in threadbare coats, staring at him like he was their last chance at survival. He should have sent them back, should have closed the door. He didn't. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind cut through the canyon like a knife looking for something soft to ruin. Caleb stood on his porch, one hand gripping the post hard enough to make the old wood creak, watching the road that snaked down from the pass. March in the Rockies didn't care about calendars or hope. It just kept pushing winter around like a bully who hadn't gotten the message that his time was up. He hadn't slept right in 3 days. The letter had come 2 weeks ago, forwarded through town by a mail clerk who probably had questions but knew better than to ask them. Your request has been fulfilled. Miss Eliza Hart will arrive March 14th via the afternoon stage. Payment arrangement as discussed. Payment arrangement. Like he was buying a plow horse. Caleb spat into the snow. He was buying a plow horse, essentially, or a cook, or someone to keep the silence from eating him alive during the months when the mountains locked him in and the only voice he heard was his own, growing stranger by the day. 43 years old. Alone since Rebecca died 6 winters back. He'd lasted this long on stubbornness and routine, but last January something had broken inside him, not dramatically, just a quiet crack, like ice forming on a window. He'd caught himself talking to her empty chair one night, asking what she thought about the elk population, and he'd realized he was 3 bad months away from becoming one of those mountain hermits people told stories about. So he'd done something stupid. He'd answered an advertisement in a 2-month-old newspaper, practical women seeking practical arrangements, correspondence marriages for Western territories. Modest terms. Modest terms meant he'd sent $40, nearly everything he'd saved from last year's pelts, to an agency in Missouri that promised to match suitable women of good character with established landowners in remote territories. Established. That was generous. He had a cabin, 20 acres that were mostly vertical, and a spring that ran year-round. He had skills with a rifle and a trap line, and he could make a decent stew out of things most people wouldn't recognize as food. He had silence and snow and a view that would break your heart if you looked at it too long. What he didn't have was a reason to get up some mornings. The stage was late. It was supposed to crest the ridge by 2 o'clock, but the sun was already starting its slide behind the western peaks, and there was still no sign of it. Caleb's hands were going numb. He should go inside, stoke the fire, stop standing out here like some lovesick fool, waiting for a woman he'd never met and didn't particularly want. Except he had paid $40. And except there was a part of him, small, stubborn, probably stupid, that wondered if maybe this could work. Not love. He wasn't looking for that. Rebecca had been love, and when she died trying to birth their son in a blizzard with no doctor for 50 miles, love had died too. Froze right there in the cabin, in the bed where he'd carried her, where he'd held her hand and lied that help was coming. No, he wasn't looking for love, but company. Partnership. Someone to share the load. Someone to cook while he hunted, to mend while he trapped, to exist in the same space so the cabin didn't feel like a tomb. That seemed possible. That seemed practical. The wind shifted and he heard it. The distant jangle of harness hardware. The creak of wheels on frozen ground. His stomach did something complicated. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching through the crust of old snow, and walked out to where the road widened near his property line. The stagecoach came around the bend looking like it had survived a war. One door hung crooked on its hinges. The canvas top was shredded in places. The driver looked about 70 years old and mean as a badger, hunched against the cold with a scarf wrapped up to his eyes. The coach lurched to a stop 20 feet from where Caleb stood. "Boone?" the driver called out, voice muffled by the scarf. "That's me. Got a delivery for you. Though I gotta say, mister, you got a hell of a nerve ordering mail order when you live at the ass end of nowhere." Caleb didn't answer. He was watching the coach door. It didn't open. The driver climbed down with the speed of a man whose joints had given up on cooperation. He shuffled to the door, yanked it open with a screech of metal, and stepped back. Nothing happened. "Come on then," the driver said, not unkindly. "This is it, end of the line." There was movement inside. A shadow. Then a hand appeared on the doorframe, pale, knuckles red from cold, fingers that shook just slightly. A woman stepped down. Caleb had prepared himself for playing. The agency had promised women of good character, which in his experience was code for women nobody else wanted. Too old, too worn, too sharp-tongued, too something. He'd made his peace with that. He wasn't any prize himself, scarred, gray in the beard, with a face that looked like the mountains had carved it with dull tools. But the woman who stepped into the snow wasn't plain. She was wrecked. Maybe 30, maybe younger. Hard to tell under the damage. Dark hair pulled back in a bun that was trying to escape. A dress that might have been nice once, years ago, before it had been mended and remended and washed until the color gave up. She was thin in a way that wasn't natural, cheekbones too sharp, shadows under her eyes that spoke of bad sleep and worse meals. But it was her eyes that hit him hardest. Brown, wide, and absolutely terrified. She looked at him like he was a judge about to hand down a sentence. "Mr. Boone?" Her voice was quiet. Educated, he thought. Eastern, maybe. "Miss Hart?" She nodded, didn't smile, didn't offer her hand. Behind her, something moved in the coach. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You bring luggage?" She glanced back at the coach, then at him, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "Mr. Boone, I need to explain." "What's to explain? You're here. I paid. We agreed on terms." "The terms—" She stopped, started again. "The terms have changed." Cold understanding started to spread through Caleb's chest. "Changed how?" Instead of answering, Eliza turned to the coach. "Girls, come here." 2 children climbed down. Not just children, ghosts shaped like children. The older one might have been 8, dark hair like Eliza's, same brown eyes, but her face had that pinched, wary look of an animal that had been kicked too many times to trust kindness. She held the hand of a smaller girl, maybe 5 or 6, who moved like she was trying not to take up space, trying not to be noticed, trying not to exist too loudly. They were dressed in clothes that were 3 sizes wrong and 2 seasons too light. No proper coats, no gloves. The little one's shoes had holes in them. They stood in the snow, holding hands, staring at nothing. Caleb stared at them, then at Eliza, then back at the children. "No," he said. Eliza's face went even paler. "Mr. Boone, no." He turned to the driver. "Take them back." The driver shook his head. "Can't do that, mister. This is the end of my route. I go back empty or I don't go back at all." "Then they can ride back with you anyway. I didn't pay for 3 people. I paid for 1. "Please," Eliza's voice cracked on the word. "Please, just let me explain." "Ain't nothing to explain. You lied about the terms. Contract's void." "There was no contract. There was an agreement, and I'm—" She stopped, visibly gathering herself. "I'm trying to honor it. I'll work. I'll do everything we discussed. I'll cook, clean, mend, keep your house. I'll do more if I have to. But they come with me. They're my sisters. I can't leave them." "Should have thought of that before you answered the advertisement." "I did think of it." There was steel under the fear now, something sharp and desperate. "Why do you think I answered it all? You think I want to marry a stranger and live in the middle of nowhere? I'm doing this because we're starving, because there's no work in Missouri for a woman with no husband and no references and 2 children to feed, because the boarding house turned us out and the church said their charity fund was empty and the factory said they don't hire women with dependents." She took a step closer. The children didn't move. "I will work harder than any woman you could have gotten. I will earn my keep 3 times over. I'm a good cook. I can sew, preserve food, tend animals. I'm not afraid of hard work, but I won't abandon my sisters. If that means you send us back, then—" Her voice wavered. "Then I guess we starve in Missouri instead of Colorado." Caleb looked at her. Really looked. She was shaking, not from cold, though that too, but from the effort of standing there, of making herself vulnerable, of begging a stranger for scraps of mercy. The children were worse. They weren't even begging. They'd gone past that into some place where hope didn't live anymore. They just stood there, small and silent, waiting to be sent away. The little one was crying, he realized. No sound, just tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. "Christ," Caleb muttered. "So that's a no then." the driver asked, already reaching for the door. Caleb didn't answer. He was doing calculations in his head, the kind he hated. 3 mouths instead of 1. 3 bodies to keep warm. 3 people to feed through a winter that could stretch into May if the mountains felt mean. He had supplies for himself and a theoretical wife. He had dried meat, flour, beans, preserves. He had a root cellar and a smokehouse and a decent stock of firewood. He'd planned carefully, but 3 people. 2 of them children who looked like they needed double rations just to get back to human. It would be tight. Maybe too tight. He should send them back. It was the smart thing to do, the practical thing, the thing that wouldn't leave him short on food come February. Mr. Boone? Eliza's voice was barely a whisper now. Caleb looked at the little one. She had brown eyes too. She was staring at him with an expression that he recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror last winter after 3 months alone. Please don't let me disappear. God damn it, he said. Then he turned and started walking toward the cabin. Behind him, silence. Then the driver's voice. So is that a yes or... It's a yes, Caleb called back without stopping. Get their things. What there is of them. He didn't look back. Didn't want to see Eliza's face. Didn't want to see relief or gratitude or whatever other complicated emotion was happening back there. He just walked, boots punching through snow, heading for the cabin that was about to get a lot more crowded. Behind him, he heard the driver grumbling, heard the rustle of bags being pulled from the coach, heard Eliza's quiet voice saying something to the children. Then footsteps. 3 sets. Following him. He'd just made a mistake. He knew it in his bones, knew it the way you know a storm is coming when the air tastes like copper and the birds go quiet. But it was too late now. The cabin door was unlocked. No point in locks when your nearest neighbor was 8 miles away. Caleb pushed it open and stepped inside, into the smell of old smoke and pine and loneliness. It was 1 room. Not small exactly, but not generous. He'd built it himself after Rebecca died, when the old cabin, their cabin, had become impossible to live in. Stone fireplace on the north wall, good and deep. A bed in 1 corner, a table with 2 chairs, a counter with a basin and a hand pump that drew from the spring, shelves with supplies, hooks for clothes, a trunk that held blankets and Rebecca's things, which he never opened. It was clean, sparse, organized the way a man organizes when he has nothing but time and silence. It was not ready for 3 people. The footsteps stopped behind him. He turned. Eliza stood in the doorway, 1 hand on each child's shoulder. She was looking around the room with an expression he couldn't read, taking inventory maybe, calculating what she'd gotten herself into. The children just looked cold. There's 1 bed, Eliza said quietly. I noticed. Where do you expect us to sleep? Caleb hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been too busy deciding whether to let them freeze or take them in. Now he had to figure out the logistics of sharing 20 feet of space with 3 strangers. I'll sleep out here, he said. You and the girls can have the bed. Wasn't a question. He moved to the fireplace, grabbed kindling from the box beside it, started building up the fire that had burned down to coals. There's blankets in the trunk, water in the pump, privies out back 20 paces. You see a path in the snow. He worked without looking at them, stacking wood, blowing on coals, coaxing flame back to life. Behind him, silence, the kind that meant people were trying to figure out what to do with themselves. Finally, Eliza spoke. The girls haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Caleb paused, poker in hand. Yesterday. We ran out of money in Denver. I'd hoped we'd arrive yesterday, but the stage was delayed by snow. He turned. The children were swaying slightly on their feet. Exhausted, probably. Starving, definitely. Sit, he said, pointing at the table. They didn't move, just stared at him with those 2 wide eyes. I'm not asking. Sit down before you fall down. Eliza guided them to the table, pulled out 1 chair for both girls. They shared it without complaint, pressed together like they were used to sharing everything. Caleb went to the shelves, pulled down what he had. Bread from 2 days ago, hard but still good. Cheese, dried venison. He brought it to the table, set it down in front of them. The older girl reached out, then stopped, looking at Eliza. It's all right, Anna, Eliza said quietly. Eat. Anna took a piece of bread. Didn't bite, just held it. Anna, Eliza said again, softer. It's all right. The little one, Caleb didn't know her name yet, grabbed cheese with both hands and shoved it in her mouth, chewed like someone might take it away. Anna started eating then too, mechanical, fast, focused. Eliza didn't take anything, just watched her sisters with an expression that made Caleb's chest hurt in a way he didn't appreciate. "You too," he said. "I'm fine." "You look like you're going to blow away in the next wind. Eat." She picked up a piece of bread, took a small bite, chewed it like it was made of sand. Caleb filled a tin cup with water from the pump, set it in front of the girls. They drank it down so fast he had to refill it twice. When they were done, when the bread was gone and the cheese was gone, and they'd eaten more dried meat than he'd planned on using this week, they sat there looking slightly less like ghosts and slightly more like children. The little one's eyes were already drooping. She leaned against Anna, who leaned against Eliza, and within minutes she was asleep, sitting up. "Her name's Ruthie," Eliza said quietly. "She's 6. Anna's 8. They're good girls. Quiet. They won't be trouble." "Everybody's trouble," Caleb said. "Question is what kind?" Eliza's jaw tightened. "I meant what I said. I'll work. I'll earn our keep. We'll see. I will. I said we'll see." He turned back to the fire, added another log. "Right now, get them to bed. You look like you need it too." "What about you?" "I'll manage." He heard her move, heard the rustle of blankets being pulled from the trunk, heard the quiet murmur of her voice as she woke Ruthie just enough to get her boots off. He didn't turn around, just stared at the fire and wondered what the hell he'd just done. This wasn't the arrangement. This wasn't what he'd paid for. This was something messier, more complicated, the kind of thing that could go wrong in 100 different ways. But when he finally turned around, when he saw them in the bed, Eliza in the middle, both girls tucked against her like she was the only warm thing left in the world, he didn't regret it. Not yet, anyway. He pulled a blanket from the pile Eliza had left out, wrapped it around his shoulders, and settled into the chair by the fire. It was going to be a long night. Long winter, probably. But for the first time in 6 years, his cabin wasn't silent. The first week was strange. Not bad. Just strange. Caleb had lived alone so long that having people in his space felt like wearing boots on the wrong feet. Technically functional, but fundamentally wrong in a way that made everything awkward. The girls were quiet. Too quiet. They moved through the cabin like mice, taking up as little room as possible, speaking only when spoken to. Ruthie hadn't said a word in 7 days. Anna spoke in whispers and never asked for anything. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Eliza worked like she was trying to prove something. She was up before dawn, asleep after he was, and in between she cooked, cleaned, mended, organized, and improved things he hadn't known needed improving. She rearranged his shelves by frequency of use. She patched holes in his clothes he'd gotten used to ignoring. She made bread that was better than his, stew that actually tasted like something, and coffee that didn't require chewing. She barely spoke to him except to ask practical questions. "Where do you keep the soap? How much wood should I use? When do you want supper?" It was exactly what he'd asked for. Partnership. Practicality. No complications. So why did it feel like she was apologizing for existing? On the 8th day, he came back from checking trap lines to find the cabin transformed. She'd scrubbed the floors, washed the windows, aired out the blankets. It smelled like lye soap and pine and something baking. The girls were sitting at the table, each with a piece of slate and a chunk of chalk. He stopped in the doorway. "What's this?" Eliza looked up from the pot she was stirring. "Lessons. Anna knows her letters. Ruthie's learning." "Where'd you get slate?" "You had pieces in the woodshed. I cleaned them up." Caleb grunted. He'd forgotten about those. Old shingles from the roof he'd replaced 2 years back. "Is that a problem?" Eliza asked, voice careful. "No." He moved past them to hang up his coat, aware of 3 sets of eyes following him. When he turned back, the girls had already returned to their slate, heads bent, focused. Ruthie was drawing something. Not letters, pictures. A house, trees, stick figures. "She doesn't talk much," Caleb said. Eliza's hand stilled on the spoon. "No? She's sick?" "No, just—" She paused. Things were hard in Missouri. She stopped talking about 4 months ago. "Why?" Eliza's expression went flat. "Because sometimes When you're 6 years old and you've watched your mother die and your father sell everything you own to pay his debts before he drinks himself to death. And then you're living in a boarding house where the landlady threatens to send you to an orphanage every time your sister is late with rent. Sometimes you just stop. Talking seems like too much effort. The words landed like stones in still water. Caleb looked at Ruthie, who was carefully drawing petals on a flower, her tongue poking out in concentration. "That why you answered the advertisement?" he asked. "Yes." "Could have mentioned it." "Would you have said yes if I had?" Honest question. Caleb considered it. "Probably not. That's why I didn't mention it." She turned back to the pot. "Supper's almost ready." He should have been angry. Should have felt lied to. Should have called the whole thing off right there. Instead, he just felt tired. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. Eliza blinked. "What?" "A rifle. You know how to use one?" "No. Why would I? We're 8 miles from town, 10 from the nearest neighbor. If something happens and I'm not here, you need to be able to protect yourself and the girls." She stared at him. "What would happen? Mountain lion, bear, wolves if they get desperate. Men, sometimes, if they're stupid and mean." He moved to the corner where he kept his guns, pulled down the spare rifle. "I'll teach you, starting tomorrow." I don't think I can." Wasn't asking. He set the rifle on the table. The girls looked at it with wide eyes. "Out here, you learn to handle what needs handling. That includes this." Eliza opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. All right. He moved to the wash basin, scrubbed the day's dirt off his hands, tried not to think about how the cabin felt different now. Warmer, fuller. Like something that had been broken was maybe starting to remember what whole felt like. It still wasn't comfortable, still wasn't what he'd planned. But when they sat down to eat, all 4 of them crowded around a table built for 2. When Ruthie smiled at something Anna whispered, when Eliza served him stew that had real vegetables in it and bread that was still warm, when the silence was broken by small sounds of life instead of just wind and his own breathing, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. The shooting lessons were a disaster. Eliza couldn't hit the broad side of a mountain from the inside. She flinched every time she pulled the trigger, jerked the barrel, and sent bullets screaming off into the trees at angles that defied physics. "You're thinking about it too much," Caleb said, standing behind her, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. "Just aim and squeeze." "I am squeezing." "You're strangling it. There's a difference." She lowered the rifle, turned to glare at him. "Maybe I'd do better if you weren't standing there criticizing every breath I take." "I'm helping." "You're looming." "I'm 6 feet away." "And somehow you're still looming." She turned back to the target he'd set up, a piece of wood with a circle chalked on it. "I don't see why this is necessary. When would I ever need to shoot something? When something needs shooting. That's not an answer." "Sure it is." She made a noise of frustration, raised the rifle again, closed one eye, took aim, fired, missed by 3 feet. "God damn," Caleb muttered. "I heard that." "Good. You should hear it. That was the worst shot I've seen since—" He stopped. "Since never. That's the worst shot I've ever seen. How do you miss by that much?" "Maybe the gun's broken." "The gun's fine. You're terrible." "Thank you for the encouragement." "You want encouragement? Or you want to learn?" Eliza turned to face him fully, rifle held across her chest like a barrier. Her cheeks were flushed from cold and anger and maybe embarrassment. "I want to go inside where it's warm and cook supper and not be yelled at about my shooting stance." "I'm not yelling. You're not helping either." They stared at each other. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Irritation, yes, but something else too. Something that noticed the way her hair had escaped its bun, the way her breath clouded in the cold air, the way she was standing her ground instead of backing down. Rebecca used to stand like that. Shoulders back, chin up, ready to fight about something stupid because sometimes fighting was better than silence. He missed it. "Again," he said quietly. "What?" "Try again. But this time don't think. Just feel where the gun's pointing. Feel where the target is, then bring them together and squeeze." Eliza looked skeptical, but turned back to the target. Raised the rifle, sighted down the barrel, paused, breathed, fired, hit the wood, not the circle, not even close to the circle, but she hit the damn wood. There, Caleb said. That's progress. Eliza lowered the rifle slowly, staring at the target like she'd just performed magic. I hit it. You did? I actually hit it. Don't get cocky. It's a 4-foot piece of wood, and you hit the edge, but yeah, you hit it. She turned to him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, made her look like someone who remembered what happiness was. Again, she said. They stayed out there for another hour. She hit the wood 6 more times. Never the circle, but the wood. By the end, her hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion, but she was grinning like a fool. When they walked back to the cabin, she was chattering about sight alignment and trigger pull and how much her shoulder hurt, and Caleb found himself listening instead of just grunting. Found himself almost enjoying the sound of her voice. Inside, the girls had set the table without being asked. Anna had drawn a picture of the cabin and pinned it to the wall with a bent nail. Ruthie was trying to copy letters from a book Eliza must have brought. It looked like a home. It looked like people lived here. Caleb hung up his coat, washed his hands, sat down at the table that was starting to feel like their table instead of just his. Eliza served stew. Anna said a quiet thank you. Ruthie ate without looking up. And for the first time since Rebecca died, Caleb thought maybe, just maybe, the silence hadn't killed him after all. 2 weeks in, the first real test came. Caleb was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard hoofbeats. Not one horse. 2, moving at a walk, taking their time. Visitors. He set down the axe, wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cold, and moved around the side of the cabin to where he could see the road. 2 riders. Well-dressed for mountain travel. Good coats, good hats, good horses. Men who had money and knew it. They stopped in front of the cabin, didn't dismount, just sat there, looking the place over like they were assessing property value. The taller one spotted Caleb. You Boone? Depends who's asking. Name's Fletcher. This is my associate, Mr. Dawes. The man had a thin mustache and eyes like coins. We're looking for a woman, Eliza Hart. We were told she came this way. Every instinct in Caleb's body went cold and sharp. Why? That's private business. Not if she's on my property. Fletcher's smile was patient the way a snake is patient before it strikes. Mr. Boone, I don't think you understand the situation. Miss Hart is bound by contract to a party in Missouri. She left without fulfilling her obligations. We're here to escort her back. What kind of contract? A financial one. She owes a debt. The debt remains unpaid, therefore, she returns. Caleb's hand drifted toward his belt, where his knife sat. You saying she's property? I'm saying she's obligated. Legally, we have papers. Don't give a damn about your papers. The second man, Dawes, shifted in his saddle. His coat moved and Caleb caught the glint of a gun. Not concealed well, maybe not meant to be. Mr. Boone, Fletcher said, still patient, still smiling, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way, you bring Miss Hart out here, we take her back to Missouri, and you go on with your life. The hard way, we involve the law, and you get charged with harboring a debtor. Your choice. Behind him, Caleb heard the cabin door open, heard Eliza's voice, quiet and scared. Caleb? He didn't turn around, kept his eyes on Fletcher. Go back inside. Are they? Inside. Now. He heard her hesitate, heard Anna's whisper, Who are they? Then the door closed. Fletcher's smile widened. So she is here. That makes things simple. What's she owe? Excuse me? The debt. How much? Fletcher exchanged a look with Dawes. $200 plus interest, plus travel expenses to retrieve her. Call it $300 total. $300. Half of what Caleb made in a good year. What'd she do to owe that much? Her father's debts became hers when he died. Standard practice. She signed papers acknowledging the transfer. She signed them freely? Does it matter? To me it does. Fletcher's patience was starting to wear thin. Caleb could see it in the tightness around his eyes. Mr. Boone, I'm trying to be civil here, but my civility has limits. We're taking Miss Hart back. The only question is whether you make trouble or not. Caleb took a step forward. Just one. Enough to close the distance slightly, enough to make his position clear. Here's what's going to happen, he said quietly. You're going to turn those horses around. You're going to ride back down that mountain. And you're not going to come back. Or what? Or I'll bury you where nobody's going to find you before spring. Silence. Fletcher stared at him. Dawes's hand moved toward his coat. Don't, Caleb said without looking at him. You pull that gun, one of us dies. Maybe both. But I guarantee it won't be me who dies first. More silence. The wind picked up, howling through the pines. Fletcher's jaw worked. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. She's legally bound. Don't care. The law's 50 miles away and won't make it up here before the pass closes for winter. By the time spring comes, you'll have forgotten all about one woman with no money. Fletcher leaned forward in his saddle. You don't know who you're dealing with. Don't care about that either. They stared at each other. Caleb kept his breathing even, his stance loose, his hand near his knife. He'd killed men before. Not many. Not for sport, but when he'd had to. During the war. Once after, when a trapper tried to rob him. He didn't like it, didn't want to do it again. But he would if he had to. Fletcher must have seen something in his face because he straightened in his saddle, gathering his reins. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. We'll be back. No, you won't. Fletcher turned his horse, Dawes following. They rode back down the road without another word. Caleb stood there until they disappeared around the bend, stood there until the sound of hooves faded, stood there until his heart stopped trying to punch through his ribs. Then he turned and went inside. Eliza was standing by the window, both girls behind her. Her face was white. They found me, she whispered. They left. They'll come back. No, they won't. You don't know that. You don't know. Her voice cracked. You don't know what they're like, what they can do. They have papers, Caleb, legal papers. They can. I don't give a damn about papers. The law doesn't reach up here in winter. He moved to the fireplace, added wood even though it didn't need it, just to have something to do with his hands. And come spring, they'll have forgotten about you. No, they won't. The debt. How much did your father actually borrow? She went very still. What? The original debt, before they added their interest and fees and travel costs. How much was it? $60. $60 that had somehow become $300. Caleb had seen that kind of arithmetic before. Loan sharks, debt collectors, men who made money off of people who had none. You didn't sign anything, he said. I did. When he died, the landlord said I had to, or he'd take Anna and Ruthie to the orphanage. I signed. Under duress. Doesn't count. It counts if they say it counts. They can say whatever they want. Doesn't make it true. Eliza sank into a chair, put her head in her hands. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Should have warned you. Now you're involved and they'll stop. They'll come back with more men, or they'll go to the sheriff, or... Eliza, stop. She looked up at him. Her eyes were red. They're not taking you, Caleb said. They're not taking the girls. You're staying here, and if they come back, they'll learn the same lesson they learned today. What lesson? That some things aren't for sale. She stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Disbelief, maybe, or the first fragile edge of hope. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Good question. Caleb didn't have a good answer. Because $40 had already been paid, and he didn't like waste? Because sending a woman and 2 starving children back to men like Fletcher felt wrong in a way that sat heavy in his gut? Because the cabin had been silent for 6 years, and now it wasn't, and he'd gotten used to the noise? Because when he looked at Ruthie and Anna, he saw the son he'd never gotten to hold, never gotten to raise, never gotten to save? All of those reasons. None of them. Because you're here, he said finally, and I don't send people away. It wasn't much of an answer, but it was the truth. That night, nobody slept well. Caleb sat in his chair by the fire, rifle across his lap, listening to every sound the mountain made. Wind in the pines, snow sliding off the roof, an owl hunting somewhere in the darkness. Normal sounds, all of them, but tonight they felt different. Tonight they felt like they might be hiding something worse. Across the room he could hear Eliza's breathing, too quick, too shallow. Awake. Probably staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in her head, each one worse than the last. The girls slept, at least. Anna curled into a tight ball. Ruthie sprawled across the middle of the bed like she owned it. Kids could sleep through anything when they were tired enough, when they felt safe enough. Caleb hoped they felt safe. Around midnight, Eliza got up, moved quiet as she could, but the floorboards had their own ideas about silence. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and came to sit at the table. "You should sleep," Caleb said without looking at her. "So should you." "I'm keeping watch." "For what? They're not coming back tonight." "Probably not." "But you're watching anyway." "Habit." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You didn't have to do that today." "Do what?" "Stand up to them, threaten them, risk—" She stopped. "You didn't have to." "Seemed like I did." "Why?" There was that question again. Why? Like she couldn't imagine someone helping her without wanting something in return. Like kindness was a transaction that always came with a bill. "You got sisters," Caleb said. "I get that. You don't leave family behind, but those men, they don't care about family. They care about money. And when people only care about money, they stop being people. They become something else. Something that needs stopping." "You think you stop them?" "For now." "And when they come back?" "If they come back," Caleb corrected. "If." That's a long ride in bad weather for $60 that turned into $300 through creative accounting. Men like that, they've got easier marks. They'll move on. "You don't know that." "No. But I know mountains. I know winter. And I know men who are more bluster than spine." He finally looked at her. "They were testing. Seeing if you were worth the trouble. I showed them you are. So they'll think twice, maybe 3 times. And by the time they stop thinking, the pass will be snowed shut and they'll have to wait for spring." "And in spring?" "In spring, we'll handle it if we have to." Eliza pulled the blanket tighter. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. She looked younger like this. Looked like someone who hadn't been carrying the world on her back for the last year. "I lied to you," she said quietly. "I know. I should have told you about the debt, about Fletcher, about everything. Would have been nice. But you wouldn't have let us stay." Caleb considered that. "Might not have. But lying didn't help either of us. I was desperate." "I know that too." "I still am." He looked at her, really looked, saw the shadows under her eyes, the thinness in her face, the way her hands shook just slightly when she thought nobody was watching. "You're safe here," he said. "For now. For as long as it takes." She met his eyes. Hers were wet, but she wasn't crying, just holding it all in the way people do when they've learned that crying doesn't fix anything. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded. Didn't know what else to do. Didn't know what to do with gratitude, with vulnerability, with a woman sitting at his table in the middle of the night looking at him like he was something more than he knew himself to be. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow you're learning to load the rifle by yourself. Can't have you depending on me for everything." Is that what we're calling this? Learning self-sufficiency? That's exactly what we're calling it. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You're a strange man, Caleb Boone." "So I've been told." She stood, blanket trailing behind her like a cloak, and went back to bed. Caleb listened to her settle in, listened to her breathing slow, listened to the cabin return to its collection of small night sounds, but he didn't sleep. Just sat there, rifle in his lap, watching the fire burn down to coals and thinking about how much easier life had been when it was just him and the silence. The days that followed fell into something like routine, though routine felt like too solid a word for what they were building. It was more like organized chaos, like watching a house get framed. You could see the shape of what it might become, but there were gaps everywhere and half the boards were crooked. Eliza kept working herself half to death. Caleb kept trying to slow her down. It became a kind of dance they did, neither one acknowledging it directly. "You don't need to scrub the floor every day," he'd say. "It's dirty. It's a cabin in the mountains. It's supposed to be dirty. Not while I'm living in it." Or she'd be up before dawn, kneading bread, and he'd tell her she didn't need to make fresh bread every other day. And she'd say she liked making bread, and he'd say nobody likes making bread that much, and she'd give him a look that said this conversation was over. The girls were slowly coming alive. Anna still moved quiet, still watched everything with those careful eyes, but she'd started asking questions. Where did he trap? What did he catch? How did you skin a rabbit without ruining the pelt? Why do you want to know that? Caleb asked one morning while he was cleaning his knife. Because I want to learn. That's not girls' work. What is girls' work? He opened his mouth, closed it. Couldn't think of a good answer that wouldn't sound stupid. Anna smiled at him, small, knowing, like she'd won something. Fine, he said. Next time I bring back a rabbit, I'll show you. Her smile got bigger. Ruthie still didn't talk, but she'd started following him around when he did chores, just shadowing him, 5 feet back, watching. He'd split wood, and she'd watch. He'd check the traps, and she'd watch. He'd repair the fence around the chicken coop he'd built 3 years ago, and she'd watch. You gonna help or just stare? He asked one afternoon. She blinked at him. Didn't answer. Just kept watching. All right then. He handed her a small hammer, pointed at a nail he'd started. Hit it. Not your thumb. The nail. She took the hammer. It was too big for her hands, but she gripped it anyway. Swung. Missed. Swung again. Connected. The nail went in crooked, but it went in. She looked up at him with something like pride. Good, Caleb said. Again. They worked like that for an hour. Ruthie hammering nails, Caleb holding boards, neither one talking. When they were done, the fence was fixed and Ruthie had a blister on her palm. She didn't complain, just showed it to Anna like it was a medal. 3 weeks after Fletcher's visit, the first snow came. Not the light dustings they'd been getting, but the real thing, heavy, wet, relentless. It started just after dawn and didn't stop for 2 days. By the time it cleared, there were 3 feet of fresh powder, and the road down to town was impassable. They were locked in now. Wouldn't get out until spring unless there was an emergency. Caleb explained this to Eliza while they stood on the porch, looking at the transformed landscape. Everything was white, clean, new. So we're trapped, she said. We're snowed in. Different thing. Feels the same. It's not. Trapped means you can't leave. Snowed in means you don't want to. He gestured at the buried road. Try walking through that. You'd make it maybe a mile before you froze or got lost or broke your leg in a hidden drift. So we stay. We wait. We survive. And if something happens? If someone gets hurt or sick? Then we handle it here. She looked at him. That's not a plan. Sure it is. It's the only plan there is. What if... Eliza. He turned to face her. I've done this for 6 years. I know what I'm doing. We've got food, firewood, water. We've got shelter. We've got what we need. The rest is just worry. Worry keeps you alive. Worry keeps you awake. There's a difference. She looked like she wanted to argue. Looked like she had a whole speech prepared about contingencies and worst-case scenarios and all the things that could go wrong. But then Anna called from inside, something about Ruthie getting into the flour, and Eliza's face shifted from worried to exasperated, and she went inside muttering about children and messes and why couldn't anyone just sit still for 5 minutes. Caleb stood there a moment longer, breathing cold air, watching the way the sun made the snow sparkle. He told her they had what they needed. That was mostly true. What he hadn't mentioned was how tight the supplies would be, how he'd calculated for himself and one woman, not 3 people, how they'd need to stretch everything, waste nothing, hope the hunting stayed good. But that was his problem to manage, not hers. He went inside. The cabin was warm, full of the smell of baking and the sound of Eliza scolding Anna for letting Ruthie make a mess, and Anna defending herself by saying Ruthie was quick, and Ruthie standing in the middle of it all, covered in white powder like a very small, very guilty ghost. Need help? Caleb asked. No, Eliza said, then immediately. Yes. Can you get her out of here before she gets into something else? Caleb scooped Ruthie up. She didn't fight it, just looked at him with those big brown eyes, flour on her nose and in her hair. Come on, troublemaker, he said. Let's get you cleaned up. He carried her to the basin, set her on the counter, used a damp cloth to wipe flour off her face. She sat very still, watching him. You know you're not supposed to get into things, he said. She didn't answer, just kept watching. Your sister works hard to keep this place running. Making messes doesn't help. Still nothing. You understand me? She nodded. Small, solemn. Good. He wiped the last of the flour away. Now go sit down and try not to cause chaos for at least an hour. She slid off the counter, landed light on her feet, and went to the table where Anna was already back at her slate. Caleb watched her go. 6 years old and silent as a stone. He wondered what it would take to get her talking again. Wondered if she ever would. Wondered if it mattered. The quiet stretched through dinner, through the evening, through the time when the girls went to bed and Eliza sat mending clothes by the fire, and Caleb worked on a new trap he was building. It was comfortable, this quiet, different from the silence he'd lived in before. That silence had been empty. This one was full. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said. "Just did. Can I ask you something else?" "Depends what it is." She set down her mending. "Why did you really answer that advertisement?" Caleb kept working on the trap, fitting pieces together, testing the trigger mechanism. "Told you. Got tired of being alone." "That's not all of it." "No?" "No." She leaned forward slightly. "You strike me as someone who's good at being alone, someone who's made peace with it, so why change that?" He tested the trap again. It snapped shut with a satisfying click. "Maybe I hadn't made as much peace with it as I thought. Or nothing. That's the answer. That's half an answer." He looked up at her. She was watching him with that direct gaze she had, the one that said she wasn't going to let this go easy. "My wife died," he said. 6 years back. She was pregnant. Things went wrong. I couldn't—" He stopped. "I couldn't save her? Or the baby? After that, I figured I was done with people. Done with caring about anyone. Easier that way. But turns out you can't actually stop being human just because you want to. You can hide from it, ignore it, but it doesn't go away." He set the trap down. "Last winter, I spent 3 months without hearing another voice. By the end, I was talking to her chair, asking it questions, waiting for answers. That's when I knew I'd gone too far." Eliza was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. About your wife." "Rebecca. Her name was Rebecca." "I'm sorry about Rebecca." Caleb nodded, picked up the trap again, started disassembling it to make adjustments. "Can I ask what she was like?" Eliza asked. "Why?" "Because I'm living in her space, sleeping in what was probably her bed, using things that were probably hers. Seems like I should know something about her." "Fair point." "She was stubborn," Caleb said. "Smart, funny when she wanted to be. Came out here with me even though her family said she was crazy. Said she'd regret it." "Did she?" "Never said so. Even when things got hard, even when we were snowed in and supplies were low and the loneliness got heavy. She never complained, just kept going." "Sounds like she was strong." "She was. Until she wasn't." He fitted the trigger back into place. "Being strong doesn't save you. Sometimes it just means you die tired." The words came out harsher than he meant. Eliza flinched slightly. "Sorry," he said. "No, you're right." She picked up her mending again. "My mother was strong too, worked herself to death trying to keep us fed after my father started drinking. She'd take in laundry, mending, any work she could find, worked 16-hour days, never stopped. Then one morning she just didn't wake up. Heart gave out. She was 34. "How old were you?" 15. Anna was 3. Ruthie wasn't born yet. "So you raised them." "Somebody had to." They worked in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Eliza said eventually. "Both trying to outrun things that can't be outrun?" "Maybe. Or maybe we're just trying to survive." "Is there a difference?" "I'd like to think so." She smiled at that, sad, knowing. "So would I." The next few weeks settled into something that almost felt normal. Caleb hunted and trapped. Eliza cooked and cleaned and taught the girls their letters. Anna learned to skin rabbits. Ruthie learned to stack firewood. They ate together, worked together, existed in the same small space without killing each other. It wasn't perfect. Caleb still woke up some mornings and forgot they were there, got startled by the sound of voices. Eliza still worked too hard, still acted like she needed to earn her right to breathe. The girls still had nightmares, still sometimes woke up crying, but it was something. Then, on a frozen morning in early April, everything changed. Caleb was checking the trap line when he heard horses again. 2 riders, same as before, coming up the road that had finally cleared enough to allow passage. But when they got close enough to see clearly, His blood went cold. It wasn't Fletcher. It was the sheriff from town, and a man Caleb didn't recognize. Young, well-dressed, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. They stopped in front of the cabin. The sheriff dismounted, looking uncomfortable. The other man stayed on his horse, looking around the property like he was appraising it. "Caleb," the sheriff said, nod of greeting. "Need to have a word." "About?" "About the woman you're harboring." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not harboring anyone. She's my wife." The lie came out smooth, confident, like he'd been practicing it. The sheriff's eyebrows went up. "Your wife." "That's right. You got papers proving that?" "Got an arrangement. That's what mail-order marriage is." "Arrangement's not the same as legal marriage." "Legal enough for me." The well-dressed man finally spoke. His voice was smooth, educated, East Coast money. "Mr. Boone, my name is Thomas Ashford. I represent the firm that holds Miss Hart's father's debts. We've been looking for her for quite some time." "Then you wasted a trip. There's no Miss Hart here." "Sheriff says otherwise." "Sheriff's mistaken." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Caleb, I saw the woman when I delivered mail last month. She matches the description these men gave me." "Lots of women match descriptions." Ashford smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Boone, let's not play games. We know she's here. We know she brought her sisters. We know she's avoiding her legal obligations. Now you can make this easy and bring her out, or you can make it difficult. But either way, she's coming with us." "No," Caleb said, "she's not." "That's not your decision to make. It is when she's on my property. Harboring a debtor is a crime." "Good thing I'm not harboring a debtor then, just living with my wife." Ashford's smile faded. "Your alleged wife." "My wife." The cabin door opened. Eliza stood there, pale but composed, both girls behind her holding onto her skirt. "It's all right, Caleb," she said quietly. "I'll go." "No, you won't. I have to. They're right. I owe—" "You don't owe anything." Caleb turned back to Ashford. "How much?" "Excuse me?" "The debt. Original amount before you vultures added your fees. How much?" Ashford's expression went cold. $60. "Fine. I'll pay it." Silence. Ashford blinked. "You'll what?" "Pay it. $60. That clears the debt, correct?" "The debt is now $340 with accumulated interest and collection fees." "That's not how debt works, and you know it. Original amount was $60. I'll pay $60, plus $10 for your trouble. $70 total. That's my offer." "That's not take it or leave it. But you're not taking her." Ashford looked at the sheriff. "Are you hearing this?" The sheriff looked deeply uncomfortable. "Caleb, that's not how the law works." "Then maybe the law needs work." Caleb crossed his arms. "You rode all the way up here to collect. I'm offering payment. Seems to me that's a fair resolution. The amount owed is $340. The amount owed is whatever you made up to justify your existence. I'm offering $70 cash money for a $60 debt. You'll take it and be grateful. Or you'll ride back down empty-handed, and we'll see what a judge thinks about men who inflate debts by 500% and then chase women across state lines to collect." Ashford's face went red. "You're threatening me." "I'm offering you a way out that doesn't end with you looking like the grasping piece of—" "Caleb," the sheriff interrupted, "let's all calm down." "I am calm." "You're about 3 seconds from doing something stupid. Only if they push me to it." Eliza stepped off the porch, walked toward them with her head up, shoulders back. "Mr. Ashford, is it?" Ashford looked at her. "Miss Hart." "Mrs. Boone, actually." She glanced at Caleb, and something passed between them. An understanding, a decision made silently. "We were married 3 weeks ago. Simple ceremony. Just us and the girls. So the name is Boone now, not Hart." "I don't believe you." "Don't particularly care what you believe." She moved to stand beside Caleb. "But my husband made you an offer. $70 for a $60 debt. That's more than fair. The legal amount is whatever you decided it was. But I'm done running from you people. I'm done being afraid. So either take the money or leave. But I'm not going anywhere." Ashford stared at her, then at Caleb, then at the sheriff, who looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "This isn't over," Ashford said. "Yeah," Caleb said. "It is." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Ashford jerked his horse's reins, turning it roughly. "We'll be back with proper legal authority." "You do that." They rode off. The sheriff gave Caleb one last look, part warning, part something that might have been respect, before following. Caleb and Eliza stood there, watching them disappear down the mountain. "We're not actually married," Eliza said quietly. "I know. You just lied to the sheriff." "I know that too." "They'll figure it out." "Maybe. Maybe not." She turned to look at him. "Why did you do that?" Same question, different context, same answer. "Because you're here," he said, "and they're not taking you." Something shifted in her eyes. Something that looked like the first crack in a wall she'd been building for years. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded. Didn't know what else to do. Behind them, Anna called out, "Are they gone?" "They're gone," Eliza answered. "Are they coming back?" "Probably." "What do we do?" Eliza looked at Caleb. He looked back. "We get ready," he said. Getting ready turned out to mean a lot of things Caleb hadn't anticipated. First, it meant teaching Eliza to shoot properly, not just hit the side of a barn. They spent 2 hours every morning out behind the cabin, her learning to load, aim, fire, reload without fumbling. She got better. Not good, but better. Good enough that she could hit a man-sized target at 20 yards if she had time to steady herself. "What if I don't have time?" she asked one morning, breath clouding in the cold air. "Then you get close enough that missing is hard." "How close is that?" "Close enough to see his eyes." She went pale, but nodded. Loaded the rifle again. Fired. Hit the target dead center. "There," Caleb said. "You're learning." Second, it meant stockpiling. Caleb went through their supplies with new eyes, calculating not just for winter, but for siege. How long could they last if they couldn't get to town? If the roads were blocked not by snow, but by men with guns and legal papers? The answer wasn't great. Maybe 6 weeks if they rationed. 8 if they got lucky with hunting. He didn't tell Eliza that part. Third, it meant watching. Always watching. Every sound from the road made him reach for his rifle. Every distant movement made him tense. He slept lighter now, one ear always listening for hoofbeats, for voices, for trouble coming up the mountain. The girls noticed. Anna asked him one afternoon why he kept looking out the window. "Just checking the weather," he said. "The weather doesn't have horses." Smart kid. Too smart. "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." "Are those men coming back?" "Maybe." "What happens if they do?" "We send them away again." "What if they don't go?" Caleb looked at her, 8 years old and already thinking 3 moves ahead, already understanding that the world didn't always work the way it should. "Then we make them," he said. Anna considered this. "How?" "However we have to." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that information away for later. Then she went back to her slate, practicing letters with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. Ruthie still didn't talk, but she'd started doing something that worried Caleb more. She'd started hiding things. Food, mostly. Small pieces of bread wrapped in cloth, tucked under her pillow. Dried meat in the pockets of her dress. An apple hidden in the woodpile. Eliza found the stash one morning while making the bed. She brought it to Caleb, laid it out on the table. A week's worth of food, rationed in child-sized portions. "She's preparing," Eliza said quietly, "for when we run out. For when we have to leave." "We're not leaving." She doesn't know that. All she knows is that bad things happen, and food runs out, and the people you trust can't always protect you. Eliza's voice cracked slightly. "She's 6 years old, and she's already planning for the worst." Caleb looked at the small pile of hoarded food. Such a small thing, such a big fear. "Put it back," he said. "What?" "Put it back where she had it. Let her keep it. If it makes her feel safer, let her have that. But we need her to feel like she's got some control, even if it's just hiding bread." He met Eliza's eyes. "Trust me on this." She looked at him for a long moment, then gathered the food and took it back to the bed. When Ruthie came in later, she checked her hiding spots immediately, casual, like she was just adjusting her pillow. Her shoulders relaxed when she found everything still there. Caleb pretended not to notice. 2 weeks after the sheriff's visit, the weather turned mean. Not snow this time, but wind. The kind that came screaming down from the peaks, carrying ice and rage and the promise of worse to come. It rattled the shutters, found every gap in the cabin's walls, made the fire dance and smoke. They were trapped inside for 3 days. 4 people in one room, going slowly crazy from proximity and boredom and the constant howl of wind. Anna and Ruthie played quiet games. Eliza cooked things that didn't need cooking just to have something to do. Caleb cleaned guns that were already clean, sharpened knives that were already sharp, and tried not to think about how the walls were closing in. On the 3rd night, Eliza finally snapped. "I can't do this anymore." Caleb looked up from the trap he was pretending to fix. "Can't do what?" "This. Waiting, hiding, wondering when they're coming back and what we'll do and how this ends." She was pacing now, 3 steps to the wall, turn, 3 steps back. "I feel like I'm suffocating." "It's just the storm. It'll pass." "I'm not talking about the storm." She stopped, faced him. "I'm talking about all of it. The debt, the men, the lying. We're not actually married, Caleb. We told the sheriff we were, but we're not. And when Ashford comes back with real lawyers and real papers, they're going to know. They're going to take me back. And probably charge you with harboring and lying to law enforcement and Eliza. And the girls will end up in an orphanage or worse, and you'll end up in jail. And all of this, everything we've built here, it'll fall apart because I made one stupid, desperate decision to answer an advertisement and drag my sisters across 3 states to Eliza." "What?" She turned on him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "What could you possibly say that makes any of this better?" Caleb set down the trap, stood, crossed to where she was standing. "We could make it real," he said. The cabin went very quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. "What?" Eliza whispered. "The marriage. We could make it real, get properly married. Then you'd be legally my wife, the girls would be legally under my protection, and Ashford and his papers wouldn't mean a damn thing." She stared at him. "You're not serious." "I am." "Caleb, we barely know each other." "I know you work too hard. You know I'm stubborn. That's more than most people know when they marry. That's not, this isn't," she pressed her hands to her face. "You can't just marry someone to solve a legal problem." "Why not? People marry for worse reasons." "Name one." "Money, land, boredom. Because their families told them to. Because they got drunk in Denver and made bad choices." He crossed his arms. "Marrying for protection seems reasonable compared to most of that." "It's insane." "Maybe, but it's also practical. You need legal protection. I need..." He stopped. "I need help here. Need someone to share the load. We already do that. Marriage just makes it official." Eliza lowered her hands, looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "What do you get out of this? Really?" "I told you." "No. What do you really get?" She stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, you're offering to tie yourself legally to a woman with debts and baggage and 2 children who aren't yours, all so we can feel safe. That's not a fair trade, Caleb. That's you taking on a burden that isn't yours to carry." "Maybe I want to carry it." "Why?" That question again, always that question. Caleb looked past her to where the girls were pretending not to listen. Anna had her eyes down, focused intensely on her slate. Ruthie was perfectly still, barely breathing. "Because this cabin's been dead for 6 years," he said quietly. "And you brought it back to life. Because I spent last winter talking to furniture, and this winter I'm arguing with a real person. Because the girls need a father, and you need a husband who's not going to sell you to pay off debts." He met her eyes. "Because somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of you as the woman I ordered and started thinking of you as the woman I chose. And if I'm choosing anyway, might as well make it legal." Eliza's breath caught. "Caleb, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. But know that if you say yes, I mean it. For real. Not just for papers." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Before she could speak, Anna's voice cut through the tension. "Someone's coming." Caleb spun. "What?" "I heard horses. 3, maybe 4. Anna was at the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. "They're coming up the road." Caleb grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. Eliza herded the girls away from it, pushed them toward the bed. Through the blowing snow, Caleb could just make out shapes. 4 riders, moving slow against the wind. It's not the sheriff, he said. How can you tell? Wrong horses. These are bigger, better, expensive. The riders came closer. Close enough to see faces now. Ashford in front, 3 men behind him, all armed. Get in the corner, Caleb said. Behind the bed. Don't come out unless I tell you. Caleb! Now! Eliza grabbed both girls, pulled them to the corner. Caleb heard the rustle of blankets, the scrape of the bed being shifted to provide more cover. The riders stopped in front of the cabin. Didn't dismount, just sat there, looking at the door like they were deciding something. Then Ashford called out, "Mr. Boone, we need to talk." Caleb didn't answer, just watched through the window. "We know you're in there. We've brought documentation, legal proof of the debt and the obligation." Still nothing. "The sheriff is 3 hours behind us with a warrant. You can make this easy or you can make it hard, but either way, Miss Hart is coming with us." Caleb checked the rifle. Fully loaded. 2 more rifles on the wall, both ready, his pistol on his belt. He had ammunition, he had cover, he had the advantage of being inside while they were exposed. But he also had Eliza and 2 children behind him, had people to protect who couldn't protect themselves. The math wasn't good. "I'm coming out," he called. "But they stay inside." He saw Ashford and his men exchange looks. "That's acceptable," Ashford said. Caleb moved to the door, rifle in one hand, looked back at Eliza. She was holding both girls tight, her face white, but her jaw set. "Don't come out," he said. "What are you going to do?" "Talk. That's all. Just talk." "Caleb, trust me." He opened the door before she could respond, stepped out into the wind and snow and the presence of 4 armed men who'd ridden through a storm to take something from him. Ashford was smiling, that same cold smile he'd had before. "Mr. Boone, reasonable of you to come out. What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, Miss Hart and the resolution of her debt." "Already told you, the debt's settled. I paid it. You offered $70 for a debt of $340. That's not payment, that's insult." "That's all you're getting?" "Then we have a problem." Ashford pulled papers from his coat. Even in the wind, they looked official, stamped, sealed. "These are legal documents, proof of debt transfer, proof of obligation, proof that Eliza Hart and her sisters are bound by contract to return to Missouri until the debt is satisfied through work or payment." "She's not going to Missouri. That's not your decision." "She's my wife. That makes it my decision." Ashford's smile widened. "Prove it." Caleb's stomach went cold. "What?" "Prove you're married. Show me the certificate. The license. Any legal documentation that you and Miss Hart entered into lawful matrimony." Ashford leaned forward in his saddle. "You can't, can you? Because you're not married. You lied to the sheriff. You're harboring a debtor, and now you're going to step aside while we take what's legally owed." The 4 men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Caleb raised his rifle. Not pointing, just raising, making his position clear. "She's not leaving. Mr. Boone, you're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. We have the law on our side, we have documentation, we have armed men. What do you have?" "I have this rifle. I have 2 more inside. And I have a willingness to use all 3 if you try to take 1 step toward that door." One of the other men laughed. "You're going to shoot 4 men over a woman you're not even married to?" "If I have to." "That's murder. That's defense of property." "She's not property. She's a debtor." "She's neither. She's a person, and she's staying here." The wind picked up, howling between them. Snow stung Caleb's face, but he didn't blink, didn't lower the rifle, didn't move. Ashford studied him for a long moment. "You'd really die for this?" "Won't be me doing the dying." "You're that sure?" "I'm that sure you'll die first. After that, odds are about even. But you definitely won't walk away." More silence. The men behind Ashford were getting nervous. Their horses were dancing, uncomfortable in the wind. Then something unexpected happened. One of the riders, the youngest one, maybe 25, spoke up. "Mr. Ashford, maybe we should reconsider." Ashford turned in his saddle. "Excuse me? The sheriff's 3 hours out. Storm's getting worse. Maybe we should wait for proper legal authority before we what? Exercise our contractual rights? Before we get into a shootout in a blizzard over $60. $340. $60 that got inflated with fake fees." The young man looked at Caleb, then back to Ashford. "Sir, I signed on to collect legitimate debts, not to threaten women and children. Ashford's face went red. You signed on to follow orders. I signed on to enforce the law. This isn't law. This is... He stopped. This is something else. The other two men were exchanging glances now. Uncomfortable. Starting to question. Ashford saw it happening, saw his control slipping. Fine, he snapped. We'll wait for the sheriff. But we're not leaving. We'll camp here, watch the cabin, make sure she doesn't run. You can camp wherever you want, Caleb said, but you're not watching anything from my property. You want to wait for the sheriff? You do it from down the road, past the tree line, off my land. That's how it's going to be. You stay here, I'll assume you're trespassing with intent to do harm, and I'll respond accordingly. Ashford stared at him, pure hatred in his eyes now, not about money anymore, about pride, about being challenged by a mountain man who wouldn't bend. This isn't over, Ashford said. Seems to be, for now. Ashford jerked his horse's reins. The young man who'd spoken up gave Caleb a small nod, respect, maybe, or apology, before following. The four of them rode back down toward the tree line, disappearing into the blowing snow. Caleb stood there until he couldn't see them anymore, until his hands stopped shaking from adrenaline and cold, until he was sure they were really gone. Then he went back inside. Eliza was standing in the middle of the cabin, still holding the girls. She looked at him with eyes that were too wide, too frightened. Are they gone? She whispered. For now. They're waiting for the sheriff. When will he get here? Ashford said 3 hours. In this storm, could be 6. Could be never if the road gets too bad. What do we do? Caleb set the rifle down, moved to the fireplace. His hands were still shaking slightly, battle nerves, leaving his system slowly. We make a choice, he said. What choice? He turned to face her. We can run, pack what we can carry, take the back trail over the ridge, try to make it to the next valley before they realize we're gone. It's dangerous in this weather. Probably stupid, but possible. Or we stay. We make the claim real. We get married, properly married, in front of witnesses if we can find them. And we fight this with the law on our side for once. Eliza set Ruthie down, kept hold of Anna's hand. How would we even do that? There's no preacher, no official. The nearest church is in town, and that's common law, Anna said quietly. They both turned to look at her. What? Eliza asked. Common law marriage. I read about it in one of your books. Anna's voice was soft but certain. In some territories, if two people live together and present themselves as married and intend to be married, they are married. No ceremony needed, no papers. Just intention and time. Caleb stared at her. Where the hell did you learn that? She reads everything, Eliza said faintly. I didn't know she was reading law books. They were there, Anna said with a shrug. Caleb looked at Eliza. She right? I don't know. Maybe. I've heard of it, but I don't know if it applies here. One way to find out. How? We ask the sheriff when he gets here. Tell him we've been living as man and wife. Tell him we consider ourselves married under common law. See if he accepts it. And if he doesn't, then we figure out something else. Caleb moved closer to her. But Eliza, we need to decide now. Before they come back, before the sheriff arrives. We need to be on the same page. She looked at him. Really looked, studying his face like she was trying to read something written there. If we do this, she said slowly, if we claim to be married, really married, what does that mean? For us, means we're partners, legally and otherwise. Means what's mine is yours. Means the girls are protected under my name. Means, he paused, means we're in this together, all the way. You understand what you're offering? You'd be taking on all of it, the debt, the danger, 2 children who aren't yours, a woman with more problems than solutions. I understand. Why? He almost laughed. That question. Always that question. Like she couldn't believe someone would choose her without coercion or desperation or some hidden angle. Because when I look at you, I don't see problems, he said. I see someone who crossed 3 states with 2 starving children because she refused to give up. I see someone who works herself to exhaustion to earn her keep even though she doesn't need to. I see someone who taught her sister to read law books and her other sister to feel safe through hiding bread. He took her hand. It was cold, shaking. I see someone worth fighting for. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Caleb, so I'm asking, will you marry me? Not for papers, not for protection, for real. She looked at him for a long moment, then at the girls, then back at him. Yes, she whispered. The word hung in the air between them. Final, real, irreversible. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 6 years starting to thaw. Okay then, he said. Okay. They stood there, holding hands in the middle of a cabin, while a storm raged outside and men with guns waited in the trees and everything hung in the balance. Anna cleared her throat. If you're married now, do we call you father? Caleb blinked, looked at her, looked at Ruthie, who was watching him with those big brown eyes. He stopped. I don't know. Do you want to? Anna considered this seriously. I think so, if that's all right. It's all right. Ruthie nodded slowly, didn't speak, but she came forward and took his other hand, small fingers wrapping around his. And for the first time since Rebecca died, Caleb felt like he had a family again. The sheriff arrived 4 hours later, just after dark. Caleb heard the horses before he saw them, multiple riders moving slow through deep snow. He went to the window. 5 men, the sheriff in front, Ashford beside him, the young man who'd spoken up before, and 2 others Caleb didn't recognize. They're here, he said. Eliza moved to stand beside him. Anna and Ruthie stayed at the table, still as statues. What do we do? Eliza asked. We tell the truth. Or close enough to it. Caleb, trust me. The knock came. Hard. Official. Caleb opened the door. The sheriff stood there looking tired and cold and deeply unhappy. Caleb, we need to sort this out. Nothing to sort. My wife and I are settled in for the winter. Everything's legal and proper. Mr. Ashford says otherwise. Mr. Ashford's trying to collect on fraudulent debt. I have papers that say different. The sheriff pulled out documents. Says here Eliza Hart owes $340 to the firm of Ashford and Associates. Says she fled Missouri to avoid payment. Says you're harboring her illegally. Can't harbor my own wife. You said you were married. Prove it. Caleb met his eyes. Common law. We've been living as husband and wife since she arrived. We present ourselves as married. We intend to stay married. That's legal in this territory. The sheriff's eyebrows went up. Common law. That's right. Since when? Since March, when she arrived. That's not how common law works, Caleb. There's time requirements. Witnesses. Intent demonstrated over. I know the requirements. We meet them. Ashford pushed forward. He's lying. They're not married. They can't prove. Mrs. Boone, the sheriff called past Caleb. You in there? Eliza appeared at the door. Caleb felt her hand find his, their fingers interlacing, presenting as married, demonstrating intent. I'm here, she said. You claim to be this man's wife? I am his wife. Under common law? Under common law and every other law that matters. The sheriff looked at their joined hands, looked at their faces, looked past them to where the girls sat at the table. Those your children? He asked Eliza. My sisters. He claims them too? We both do. The sheriff sighed, rubbed his face. Caleb, you're putting me in a difficult position. You're putting yourself there. I'm just living my life. These men have legal papers. These men have papers that inflate a $60 debt to $340 through fraudulent fees. That's not legal. That's theft. That's a matter for a judge. Then get a judge. But until you do, my wife stays here. Ashford was turning red. Sheriff, this is obstruction. Mr. Ashford, I'm trying to sort this out peacefully. The sheriff turned back to Caleb. You really want to fight this? You really want to stake your freedom on a common law claim that might not hold up in court? Yes. Even knowing you could be charged with harboring? With fraud? With interfering with legal debt collection? Yes. Why? Caleb squeezed Eliza's hand. Because she's my wife. And I don't give a damn about your debt collection. The sheriff stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Ashford, then back at Caleb. I can't determine common law marriage standing here in the snow, he said finally. That's for a judge. But I also can't force you to hand over someone you claim is your wife without a court order. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here. They're going to leave. And when the circuit judge comes through in May, you're both going to appear before him and sort this out legally. That's unacceptable, Ashford snapped. That's how it's going to be. The sheriff's voice went hard. Mr. Ashford, you've dragged me up a mountain in a snowstorm to collect on a debt that may or may not be legitimate. I'm cold, I'm tired, and I'm done. You want to pursue this, you do it through proper legal channels. But right now, I'm ordering you off this property. You can't. I'm the sheriff. That's exactly what I can do. He looked at his men. We're leaving. Anyone who wants to stay and freeze to death is welcome to it. The men started turning their horses, all except Ashford. This is corruption, he said. You're protecting a debtor. I'm enforcing the law as I see it. If you disagree, take it up with the judge in May. The sheriff mounted his horse. Caleb, I'll be back when the pass clears. You better be able to back up these claims. I will be. Good. He tipped his hat. Mrs. Boone? Eliza nodded. Sheriff. They rode off into the darkness, all except the young man who'd spoken up before. He lingered for a moment, then leaned down from his saddle. Ma'am, he said to Eliza, I'm sorry about all of this. It wasn't right. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded to Caleb. You're a braver man than me. Or stupider. Maybe both. He smiled. Good luck. Then he was gone too. Caleb and Eliza stood in the doorway, watching until the last sound of hooves faded, until they were alone again, with just the wind and the snow and each other. We have until May, Eliza said. We do. What happens in May? We convince a judge we're really married. And if we can't? Caleb closed the door, turned to face her in the warm firelight of the cabin. Anna and Ruthie were watching them, silent witnesses to everything that had just happened. Then we run, he said. We take everything we can carry, and we disappear into the mountains, and we don't come back. You do that? Give up your home? This cabin's not my home. He looked at her, at the girls, at the space they'd filled with life and noise and complicated, messy humanity. You are. Eliza's face crumpled. She pressed her hand to her mouth, holding back a sob. Caleb pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, burying her face in his shoulder, shaking with relief and fear and something that might have been hope. We're going to be okay, he said into her hair. Promise? Promise. It was a lie. He had no idea if they'd be okay, had no idea if a judge would accept their common law claim, had no idea if Ashford would give up or come back with more men and better lawyers. But standing there with Eliza in his arms, and the girls watching with careful hope in their eyes, and the cabin warm around them, the lie felt like it might become truth. And that was enough. The weeks after the sheriff's visit felt like living inside a held breath. Every morning, Caleb woke up expecting trouble. Every night he went to sleep listening for hoofbeats. But the mountain stayed quiet, locked in winter's grip, and the only sounds were wind and snow and the domestic rhythms of four people learning to exist as something resembling a family. Eliza started wearing his mother's ring. He'd found it in the trunk one morning, buried under blankets and memories he'd been avoiding for 6 years. Simple silver band worn smooth from decades of use. He'd brought it to her without explanation, just held it out. What's this? She'd asked. Ring. Thought you should have one, if we're claiming to be married. She'd taken it slowly, turning it over in her fingers. This was your mother's? Yeah. Caleb, I can't. This is too much. It's a ring. You need a ring. That's a ring. He'd felt awkward standing there, like a boy asking a girl to dance. Just take it. She'd slipped it on, perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her. Thank you, she'd whispered. He'd nodded and walked away before the moment could get more complicated than it already was. Now she wore it every day, twisted it when she was nervous, which was often. Caleb found himself watching her hands more than he should, watching that ring catch the firelight, watching her fingers move as she kneaded bread or mended clothes or taught the girls their numbers. It looked right there. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The girls were changing too. Anna had started calling him father without hesitation. like she'd made a decision and committed to it fully. Ruthie still didn't talk, but she'd started following him everywhere again, her small shadow stretching behind his wherever he went. One afternoon he was chopping wood, and she appeared beside him, holding the small hammer he'd given her weeks ago. "What?" he asked. She pointed at the woodpile, then at herself, then at the hammer. "You want to help?" Nod. "All right, stack the pieces as I split them. Keep them neat." She set to work immediately, taking each piece as he split it, arranging them in careful rows. She was meticulous about it, making sure every piece fit just right, building the pile like it was something important. They worked in silence for an hour. When they were done, the woodpile was twice as neat as when Caleb did it alone. "Good work," he said. She smiled at him. Rare, precious. Then she went back inside, hammer still clutched in her small hand. Caleb stood there for a moment, looking at the perfectly stacked wood, and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut since Rebecca died. He thought he was done with this, done with caring about people who could be taken away, done with building things that could break. Turned out he was wrong. Town started talking in late April, when the road finally cleared enough for travel. Caleb heard about it from Thomas, his nearest neighbor, who rode up one afternoon looking uncomfortable. "Thought you should know," Thomas said, sitting at the table with coffee Eliza had poured. "People are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind about you and the woman living here. And the children." Thomas glanced at Eliza, who was standing by the stove, listening. "No offense, ma'am." "None taken," she said quietly. "What are they saying?" Caleb asked. "That you're living in sin, that the children aren't properly cared for, that you claim to be married but nobody saw a ceremony." Thomas shifted in his chair. "That preacher from the Methodist Church, Reverend Michaels, he's been asking around about you, talking about moral obligation and proper Christian conduct." "I don't attend his church. Doesn't matter to him. He thinks it's his job to police everybody's morals, whether they asked for it or not." Thomas took a sip of coffee. "He's planning to ride up here, talk to you about making things right." "Things are right." "He won't see it that way. He'll see a man and a woman living together without a proper marriage. He'll see children being raised in what he considers an immoral household. And he'll make noise about it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Let him. Caleb, he's got influence. People listen to him. If he decides to make trouble, he can make real trouble. Get the community involved. Maybe even get someone to challenge your common law claim before it reaches the judge." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that common law requires community recognition. If the community doesn't recognize you as married, the judge might not either." Silence fell over the cabin. Eliza's hand went to the ring on her finger, twisting it. "What do we do?" she asked. Thomas looked at her, then at Caleb. "You could have a proper ceremony. Invite people. Make it official in a way that nobody can question." "We're already married," Caleb said. "Then prove it. Show everyone you mean it. Take away their ammunition before they can use it against you." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to say that what he and Eliza had was nobody's business but theirs, that they didn't need to perform for the community's approval. But Thomas was right. They needed the community on their side, or at least neutral. Couldn't afford to have everyone in town thinking they were living in sin. "I'll think about it," he said. Thomas nodded, finished his coffee. "For what it's worth, Caleb, I think you're doing a good thing here. Those girls look healthy, happy. That's more than they had before." "Thanks." After Thomas left, Eliza came and sat across from Caleb at the table. The girls were outside, playing in the mud that spring was making of the snow. "He's right," she said. "I know. We should do it, have a ceremony, make it real for them." "It is real. Real for us. Not real for them." She reached across the table, took his hand. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know this whole thing has been me and my problems crashing into your life, but if we're going to do this, we should do it right. Not just for the judge. For us." Caleb looked at their joined hands. Her fingers were rougher now than when she'd arrived, calloused from work. The ring sat comfortable on her finger. "You want a ceremony," he said. "I want people to stop questioning whether we have a right to exist as a family. If a ceremony does that, then yes." "In front of the whole town? In front of whoever needs to see it." He thought about that. Thought about standing in front of people who'd known him for years, claiming a woman he'd met 3 months ago as his wife. Thought about the girls watching, about what it would mean to them. Thought about Rebecca, who he'd married in a simple ceremony in her father's parlor with just family watching, who'd worn a blue dress and flowers in her hair and smiled at him like he was the only thing that mattered. This would be different. This was strategic, practical, a performance for an audience that had too much say in their lives. But maybe that was all right. Maybe this was just another kind of survival. All right, he said, we'll do it. Eliza's face lit up. Not with joy exactly, more like relief, like she'd been holding her breath and could finally let it out. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met Reverend Michaels. The preacher arrived 3 days later, riding a gray mare and carrying a Bible that looked like it had survived a war. He was older than Caleb expected, maybe 60, with white hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Caleb met him outside. Didn't invite him in. Reverend, he said. Mr. Boone, I'm glad to finally meet you. I've heard much about you. I'm sure you have. Michael smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I understand you've taken in some unfortunate souls, a woman and 2 children. I've married a woman and taken in her sisters. Nothing unfortunate about it. Married, you say? I wasn't aware of a ceremony. Common law. Recognized by the territory. Ah, yes. Common law. Michael said it like he was talking about something distasteful. A convenient arrangement, though some might question its spiritual validity. Good thing I don't care about their questions. Mr. Boone, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to offer assistance. The church provides services for couples who wish to formalize their union in the eyes of the community and before their Creator. I'd be happy to perform such a ceremony for you. Caleb studied him, trying to figure out the angle. Preachers didn't ride 8 miles up a mountain out of pure generosity. What's it cost? He asked. Cost? There's no monetary cost, just the cost of your commitment to living righteously. And what does that mean? It means raising those children in a proper household. It means attending services when you're able. It means conducting yourself in a manner that reflects well on the community. Michael's smile sharpened. It means people stop questioning whether you're fit to keep those girls. There it was, the threat under the kindness. Who's questioning? Caleb asked. Concerned citizens. People who worry about children being raised in questionable circumstances. The circumstances are fine. Are they? A woman who arrived here under dubious pretenses. Children who aren't yours by blood. A marriage that exists only in your word. Michaels leaned forward slightly. Mr. Boone, I'm offering you a way to silence those concerns. Accept the church's blessing. Let me marry you properly. Show the community you're serious about doing right by these people. Caleb wanted to tell him to ride back down the mountain and mind his own business. Wanted to say that his relationship with Eliza and the girls was nobody's concern but theirs. But he could see the calculation in Michael's eyes, could see that this wasn't really an offer. It was a demand wrapped in politeness. When? He asked. Sunday next, at the church in town. Invite whoever you'd like. Make it a celebration. And if I say no, then I suppose the questions will continue and grow louder, and perhaps reach the ears of people who have authority over such matters. Michael straightened. Your choice, Mr. Boone. Caleb felt his hands curl into fists, forced them to relax. I'll talk to my wife. Excellent. I look forward to seeing you both Sunday. Michaels turned his horse. Oh, and Mr. Boone? Do bring the children. People will want to see them, want to know they're being properly cared for. He rode off before Caleb could respond. Inside, Eliza was waiting by the window. She'd heard everything. He's forcing us, she said. Yeah, we have to do it. I know. She turned to face him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry my presence here has caused all this trouble. I'm sorry you have to perform for people who should mind their own business. I'm sorry. Stop. Caleb crossed to her, took her shoulders. This isn't your fault. This is them. People who think they have a right to control how others live. But if we have to play their game to protect the girls, then we play it. It's not fair. No. But it's what we've got. She leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with frustration and fear and anger. I hate this, she whispered. So do I. But we'll do it anyway. Yeah, we will. Sunday came too fast. Caleb put on his only good shirt, the one he saved for funerals and didn't think he'd ever wear again. Eliza wore a dress she'd made from fabric she'd found in town, simple blue cotton that made her eyes look darker. The girls wore their best, too. Anna in a dress that actually fit her now, after weeks of regular meals. Ruthie in something Eliza had stitched together from scraps, patched but clean. They looked like a family. That was the point. The ride to town was quiet. Caleb drove the wagon, Eliza beside him, the girls in the back. Nobody spoke much, just watched the road roll by, watched the town come into view in the valley below. The church was full. That was the first surprise. Caleb had expected a few people, maybe Thomas and a handful of others. But the pews were packed. Seemed like half the town had come to watch. To judge, more likely. They walked in together. Heads turned, whispers started. Caleb kept his eyes forward, hand on Eliza's arm, the girls close behind. Reverend Michael stood at the front, Bible in hand, smile on his face. "Welcome," he said loudly. "Welcome all who've come to witness the union of Caleb Boone and Eliza Hart." More whispers. Caleb heard them commenting on the girls, on Eliza's dress, on how strange this all was. He wanted to leave, wanted to take his family and walk out and tell all these people what they could do with their judgment. But Eliza's hand found his and squeezed, steady, strong, reminding him why they were here. The ceremony was short. Michaels asked the traditional questions. Caleb answered them. So did Eliza. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Do you, Caleb Boone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Eliza Hart, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Michaels smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb looked at Eliza. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't planned for it. But she was looking at him with those dark eyes, and the whole town was watching, and this was the moment that made it real for them. He leaned in, kissed her gently, brief, proper. She kissed him back. When they pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed. His heart was beating too fast. The congregation applauded. Polite, reserved. The sound of people doing their duty. Michaels announced the marriage official, said they'd sign the certificate after. Said everyone was invited to stay for refreshments the ladies' auxiliary had prepared. Caleb and Eliza walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. Actually husband and wife now, no qualifications, no common law debate. Legal. Recognized. Official. The girls followed. Anna was smiling. Ruthie looked overwhelmed, but she was holding Anna's hand tight. Outside, people approached to offer congratulations. Most were genuine. Some were clearly just checking them out, looking for signs of whatever scandal they'd hoped to find. Thomas clasped Caleb's hand. "Well done. You've shut them up for now." "For now," Caleb agreed. A woman Caleb didn't know approached Eliza. "Such a lovely ceremony, and the girls are precious. Are they yours?" "My sisters," Eliza said. "How wonderful that they'll be raised in a proper home now." The woman leaned closer. "There was some talk, about the circumstances, but this puts it all to rest." "I'm glad," Eliza said, voice tight. The woman moved on. Another replaced her. Then another. All asking the same polite questions, all trying to dig for information. Caleb watched Eliza handle them with grace she shouldn't have to need. Watched her smile and answer and deflect, and never let them see how much this bothered her. He was proud of her, and angry for her, and wishing they could just leave. Finally, after an hour of performing for people who had no business in their lives, they made their excuses and left. The ride home was quiet again, but different this time. Not tense, just exhausted. "That was awful," Eliza said finally. "Yeah, but necessary." "Yeah." "Are we done performing now?" Caleb looked at her. At the ring on her finger that matched the one he'd put there during the ceremony. At the certificate of marriage folded in his pocket that made it all legal. "I hope so," he said. But he knew better. Knew that people would keep watching, keep questioning, keep trying to find something wrong with their family because it didn't fit the mold they expected. They'd have to keep proving themselves. Keep showing that they were legitimate. Keep fighting for the right to exist as they chose. But at least now they had papers, had witnesses, had legal standing that even Ashford would have trouble challenging. It was something. The weeks after the ceremony brought a different kind of pressure. Now that they were officially married, Now that the town had witnessed and approved, people expected things. Expected them to attend church services. Expected them to participate in community events. Expected them to act like a normal family. Caleb hated it. He'd lived alone for 6 years specifically to avoid this kind of social obligation. Now he was trapped in it, dragged to Sunday services where Michaels preached about duty and righteousness, forced to stand around after and make small talk with people he barely knew. Eliza handled it better. She was good with people, good at saying the right things, good at making the girls presentable and charming. But he could see the toll it took, could see her exhaustion after each trip to town, each performance of normalcy. "We don't have to keep doing this," he said one night after a particularly draining Sunday. "Yes, we do. Until the judge comes. Until our claim is settled. We have to show that we're a real family, a proper family. We are a real family. We are. But they need to believe it too." She was right. He knew she was right. Didn't make it easier. The judge was scheduled to arrive in mid-May. They had 2 weeks left. 2 weeks of performing, of proving, of showing the world that their marriage was legitimate and their family was real. 2 weeks felt like forever. Then, one afternoon while Caleb was in town buying supplies, he overheard a conversation that changed everything. 2 men at the general store talking in low voices. They didn't see him behind the shelves. "Ashford's coming back," one said. "I thought the sheriff sent him packing." "He did, but Ashford's bringing lawyers this time, real ones from Denver. Says he's going to contest the marriage, says it's fraudulent, that Boone only married her to avoid debt collection." Caleb's blood went cold. Can he do that? If he can prove it was a sham marriage, yeah. If he can show it was only done to avoid legal obligation, the judge might invalidate it. Send her back to Missouri to settle the debt. What about the girls? Who knows? Orphanage, maybe, or they go back with her. Caleb set down the supplies he'd been holding, walked to the counter, paid quickly, and left. He rode home faster than was safe, the horse's hooves pounding against hard-packed earth. Eliza was in the garden when he arrived, teaching the girls to plant seeds. She looked up at his approach, saw his face, and immediately stood. "What's wrong?" "Inside. Now." She herded the girls ahead of them. Once they were all in the cabin, Caleb told them what he'd heard. Eliza went white. "He's going to challenge the marriage?" "He's going to try. Says it's fraudulent, that we only did it to avoid debt collection." "But we didn't. We got married before the judge was scheduled to arrive. We got married because—" She stopped. "We got married because you asked me to." "Yeah, but Ashford doesn't know that. All he knows is the timeline. All he can prove is that you owed a debt, I claimed you as my wife, and then we got married officially right before the judge arrived." Caleb paced. "From the outside, it looks exactly like a sham marriage. But it's not. We know that, but how do we prove it?" Silence. Eliza sank into a chair. Anna and Ruthie stood close to her, sensing the danger even if they didn't understand all the details. "What do we do?" Anna asked quietly. Caleb looked at her, 8 years old and trying to be brave, trying to understand why the world kept trying to take away everything she cared about. "We fight," he said. "We tell the truth and we fight." "What if the truth isn't enough?" Eliza asked. "Then we run. Like I said before, we take everything we can carry and we disappear. They'll find us. Maybe. But we'll make it hard." Eliza twisted her ring, the one that had been his mother's, the one that meant something now, meant more than just a prop for legitimacy. "I'm tired of running," she said quietly. "I know. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of men like Ashford deciding what happens to us. I'm tired of having to prove we deserve to exist." She looked up at him. "I want to fight, really fight, not just survive. Fight." "How?" "I don't know. But there has to be a way." Anna spoke up. "We could get witnesses, people who know we're really married." "Who would testify to that?" Caleb asked. "We've only been married a few weeks officially. Nobody really knows us as a couple." "Thomas knows," Anna said. "He came by before the ceremony. He saw how you were together. He could testify." "One witness isn't enough against lawyers from Denver." "Then we get more." Anna's voice was getting stronger. "We get the neighbors who've seen us. We get people from church who saw the ceremony. We get everyone who knows this is real." Caleb looked at this 8-year-old girl building a defense strategy like a lawyer. Where'd you learn to think like this? From watching people try to take things from us my whole life. Anna's jaw was set. I'm done letting them win. Eliza pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. So are we. They spent the next week preparing. Caleb rode to Thomas's place, explained the situation, asked if he'd testify. Thomas agreed immediately. Anyone with eyes can see you're a real family, he said. I'll tell the judge that. They went to other neighbors, to people from church, to anyone who'd seen them together and could vouch for the legitimacy of their marriage. Most agreed to help. A few refused, not wanting to get involved, but enough said yes that they had hope. Eliza wrote down everything. When they'd met, how their relationship had developed, the moment Caleb had proposed, the ceremony, the life they'd built together. We need to show the pattern, she said. Show that this wasn't sudden, that it developed naturally. It was pretty sudden, Caleb pointed out. You arrived in March. We married in May. People fall in love in less time. He looked at her. Is that what this is? She met his eyes. Didn't answer immediately, just looked at him like she was trying to figure something out. I don't know, she said finally. But it's something real, something worth fighting for. Yeah, he said. It is. The night before the judge was scheduled to arrive, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle for the third time, trying not to think about what might happen tomorrow. Eliza came and sat beside him. She'd braided her hair for bed, wore one of his old shirts over her nightgown. Can't sleep either? She asked. No. Worried? Yeah. Me too. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Outside, the mountain was quiet, settling into late spring darkness. Whatever happens tomorrow, Eliza said, I want you to know something. What? When I answered that advertisement, I was desperate. I would have done anything to save my sisters. I would have married anyone, lived anywhere, become whoever I needed to be. She turned to look at him. But this, what we have now, this isn't desperation anymore. This is choice. I choose you. I choose this life. And if the judge says it's not real, he's wrong. Caleb's throat tightened. Eliza, I mean it. You're a good man, Caleb Boone. Better than you think you are. And I'm grateful every day that I stepped off that stage and you didn't send me back. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't trust his voice to work properly. So he just took her hand, held it, felt the ring under his fingers, the one that had been his mother's and was now hers. I'm grateful too, he managed finally. She leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the fire burned down to coals, until the first light of dawn started creeping through the windows. Tomorrow they'd face the judge, face Ashford and his lawyers, face whatever judgment the world wanted to pass on their family. But tonight they were just here, together, real in a way that had nothing to do with papers or ceremonies or legal recognition. And whatever happened, nobody could take that away. The courthouse in town was smaller than Caleb remembered. Just one room with benches for spectators, a desk for the judge, and windows that let in too much light for the kind of darkness they were about to face. Judge Harrison arrived at 9. He was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 50, with tired eyes and the look of a man who'd heard every lie the human race could invent. He set his case on the desk, surveyed the packed room, and sighed like he already regretted coming. Ashford sat in the front row with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. They had stacks of papers, leather folders, the confidence of men who'd never lost and didn't plan to start today. Caleb and Eliza sat across the aisle. Thomas was behind them, along with a handful of neighbors who'd agreed to testify. Anna and Ruthie sat between Caleb and Eliza, too young to be here but too important to leave behind. The judge rapped his gavel once. We're here to address the matter of debt collection and the validity of a common law marriage claim. Mr. Ashford, you're challenging the marriage of Caleb and Eliza Boone? One of the lawyers stood, tall, silver-haired, voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. We are, Your Honor. We contend that this marriage is fraudulent, entered into solely to avoid legal debt collection. We have documentation showing that Miss Hart, Mrs. Boone, Eliza said quietly. The lawyer paused, looked at her like she was a bug that had spoken. I'm sorry? My name is Mrs. Boone, not Miss Hart. We were married 6 weeks ago in front of this community. A ceremony arranged hastily once you learned we were pursuing collection. A ceremony arranged because we wanted to be married. Eliza's voice was steady. Caleb felt her hand find his under the table, her fingers interlacing with his. Because we chose each other. The lawyer smiled, cold, professional. We'll see about that. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, we have evidence showing a pattern of deception. Miss Hart, Mrs. Boone, fled Missouri to avoid paying her father's legitimate debts. She answered a mail-order bride advertisement under false pretenses, failing to disclose her financial obligations or the presence of 2 additional dependents. When confronted by my client's representatives, Mr. Boone made threats of violence and false claims of marriage. Only when legal action became imminent did they formalize this supposed union. He laid papers on the judge's desk. The timeline speaks for itself. She arrived in March. Debt collectors appeared in early April. A common law claim was made. The sheriff was told they were married. And then conveniently, a formal ceremony occurred just weeks before this hearing. This is not a marriage, Your Honor. This is fraud designed to circumvent legal debt collection. The judge looked at the papers, looked at Caleb and Eliza. Mr. Boone, how do you respond? Caleb stood. He wasn't good at this, at talking in front of people, at making arguments in fancy language. He was good at surviving mountains and fixing problems with his hands and saying what needed saying without decoration. So that's what he did. I married her because I wanted to, he said, not because of debt, not because of timelines, because somewhere between her arriving scared and half-starved with 2 kids who needed help, and her teaching those kids to read while learning to shoot a rifle, and her making my cabin feel like a home instead of a grave, somewhere in there, I decided I wanted her to stay. Not as an arrangement, as my wife. The judge's expression didn't change. That's a nice story, Mr. Boone. Can you prove it? Prove what? That I care about her? That she cares about me? How do you prove something like that? With evidence? With witnesses? With something more than words? The lawyer seized on that. Exactly, Your Honor. Words are cheap. Mr. Boone claims affection, but the facts suggest calculation. He's a man who lived alone for 6 years after his first wife's death. A man with no interest in remarriage until a woman with convenient debts appeared on his doorstep. She didn't appear. I sent for her. Caleb's voice was getting harder. I answered an advertisement because I was tired of being alone. I asked for 1 woman and got 3 people. I could have sent them back. Should have, probably. Would have been smarter, but I didn't. And not because of any scheme, because they needed help and I had it to give. How charitable, the lawyer said, dripping sarcasm. But charity doesn't make a marriage legal. No, but choice does. And I chose her. After the debt collectors arrived. Before, during, after. Doesn't matter when. What matters is I chose her and she chose me and we're married now, legal and proper, and you can take your debts and your papers and… Mr. Boone, the judge interrupted, I understand you're frustrated, but threats won't help your case. Caleb bit back what he wanted to say. Sat down. Felt Eliza's hand squeeze his. The lawyer continued, Your Honor, we're not disputing that a ceremony occurred. We're disputing the intent behind it. A marriage entered into solely to avoid legal obligation is not a valid marriage. It's fraud, and fraud doesn't erase debt. What debt? Anna's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned. She was standing, small and fierce, hands clenched at her sides. The judge leaned forward. Young lady, this isn't… What debt? Anna repeated. The one your client says is $340, because my sister's father borrowed $60. 60. And your client added fees and interest and travel costs until it became something it never was. That's not debt collection. That's theft. The lawyer's face reddened. The debt was legally transferred to a 15-year-old girl who was told she had to sign papers or her sisters would be taken away. That's not legal transfer. That's coercion. Anna, Eliza said quietly, sit down. No. Anna looked at the judge. You want to know if they're really married? Look at them. Look at how he looks at her. Look at how she looks at him. Look at us. She gestured to herself and Ruthie. We were starving 3 months ago. We were afraid all the time. We didn't have a home. Now we do. Because he gave us one. Because she made us one, because they chose to be a family. Her voice cracked. My whole life, people have taken things from us. Our mother, our father, our home, our money, everything. And we survived because Eliza never gave up, never stopped fighting. And now you're going to let these men take her away because of money she doesn't owe? Because of papers that say she's property? Miss Hart, it's Boone, Anna Boone. Because he's my father now. And she's my sister and his wife. And you don't get to take that away. She sat down. The courtroom was dead silent. Ruthie stood up. Everyone stared. She hadn't spoken in months, hadn't made a sound except crying in her sleep. She looked at the judge, opened her mouth. Family, she whispered. One word, barely audible, but it cut through everything. Eliza made a sound that might have been a sob, pulled Ruthie close. The judge sat back in his chair, studied them for a long moment, looked at the lawyers with their expensive suits and their stacks of papers, looked at Caleb and Eliza and two little girls who'd just spoken more truth than all the legal arguments combined. Mr. Ashford, he said, approach the bench. Ashford and his lawyers went forward. The judge spoke quietly with them. Caleb couldn't hear what was said, but he saw Ashford's face getting redder, saw the lawyers arguing in low, urgent voices. Finally, the judge waved them back. Here's my ruling, he said. First, regarding the debt. The original amount borrowed was $60. The accumulation of fees and interest to $340 is, in my opinion, predatory and likely unenforceable. However, the original debt remains valid. Caleb's stomach sank. Therefore, I'm ordering Mr. Boone to pay $60 to satisfy the original debt, not $340. 60 plus $10 in reasonable collection costs, $70 total. The same amount he offered months ago, which Mr. Ashford should have accepted. Ashford shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's not— Sit down, Mr. Ashford. I'm not finished. The judge's voice was steel. Second, regarding the marriage, I've reviewed the timeline, I've heard the testimony, and I've watched how these people look at each other, how they protect each other, how they've built something together in the face of people like you trying to tear them apart. He looked at Caleb and Eliza. Is this marriage convenient? Yes. Does it serve a purpose beyond romance? Absolutely. But that doesn't make it fraudulent. People marry for all sorts of reasons. Security, companionship, survival. And sometimes, if they're lucky, those practical arrangements become something more. He picked up his gavel. I find that Caleb and Eliza Boone are legally married under both common law and formal ceremony. Their marriage is valid. The debt is satisfied by payment of $70. And Mr. Ashford, you and your associates are hereby ordered to cease all collection activities related to this matter. The gavel came down. Silence. Then Thomas started clapping. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. Ashford was standing there, face purple with rage. His lawyers were already packing their papers, clearly done with this case, done with him. This is an outrage, Ashford sputtered. We'll appeal. You can try, the judge said mildly, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you want me to look more closely at your business practices, at how you inflate debts and pursue vulnerable women across state lines, at how you operate. Ashford's mouth snapped shut. We're done here, the judge said. Mr. Boone, pay the clerk $70 on your way out. Everyone else, go home. Caleb stood on shaking legs, pulled out the money he'd brought, just in case, and handed it to the clerk. $70. 3 months of trapping reduced to paper and coins. But it was done. The debt was paid. The marriage was legal. Ashford had lost. They'd won. Outside, people congratulated them. Thomas pumped Caleb's hand so hard it hurt. Reverend Michaels nodded approvingly, like he'd been on their side all along. Neighbors smiled and welcomed them properly into the community. Caleb barely heard any of it. He was focused on Eliza, who was holding both girls and crying quietly. On Anna, who looked stunned and relieved. On Ruthie, who'd spoken for the first time in months and was now pressed against her sister's side. Come on, he said. Let's go home. The ride back to the cabin was quiet but different from the ride down. Lighter. Like they'd been carrying weight they could finally put down. Anna fell asleep in the wagon bed, exhausted from the morning's tension. Ruthie curled up beside her, thumb in her mouth, something she hadn't done in weeks. Eliza sat beside Caleb on the bench, their shoulders touching. We won, she said finally. Yeah. I didn't think we would. I thought, her voice caught, I thought they'd take me, take the girls, that you'd be left here alone again, and it would be my fault. Wasn't going to happen. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because I wouldn't have let them. He looked at her. I told you before. You're free because I say you are. Judge just made it official. She laughed, wet, shaky. You can't just decide things like that. Just did. Caleb Boone, you're the most stubborn man I've ever met. And you married me anyway. Twice, apparently. Want to go for 3? She laughed again. Real this time. Leaned her head on his shoulder. I think twice is plenty. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The mountain opened up before them, green with spring, alive with water running from melting snow. Ruthie spoke, Eliza said quietly. She did. One word, but she spoke. It was a good word, the best word. Eliza's hand found his. Family. Caleb thought about that word, about what it meant, about how he'd lost one family and thought he'd never have another, about how 3 strangers had shown up in the snow and somehow become the thing he'd stopped believing was possible. Yeah, he said. It was. The cabin looked different when they arrived. Smaller, maybe, or just more complete, like it had been waiting for them to fill it properly. Caleb carried the sleeping girls inside, laid them on the bed. They didn't wake up, just curled together like puppies. Eliza started making coffee even though nobody asked for it, just needed something to do with her hands. Caleb stood at the window, looking out at the land he'd lived on for 6 years, the mountains that had been his only company, the silence that had nearly killed him. What are you thinking? Eliza asked. That I spent a long time being alone, he said. Thought that was safer, easier. Couldn't lose people if you didn't have people. And now? Now I think I was wrong. Being alone isn't safer. It's just slower dying. She came to stand beside him. Being together isn't safe either. People still leave. People still die. Hearts still break. Yeah, but at least you're alive when it happens. She looked up at him. Is that what this is? Being alive? I think so. Feels like it anyway. It's terrifying. Yeah. But also, she paused. Also good. Really good. He pulled her close. She came willingly, wrapped her arms around him, pressed her face into his chest. We're really married now, she said, muffled against his shirt. We were really married before. I know, but now it's official, legal, permanent. Permanent, he repeated. That scare you? Terrifies me. She pulled back enough to look at him. But I choose it anyway. I choose you. I choose this, even knowing it might hurt, even knowing nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever, Caleb agreed. But some things last long enough. She smiled at that, sad, hopeful, human. Long enough, she said. I can work with that. Spring turned into summer. The mountains softened, trading snow for wildflowers, and cold for warmth that made living feel less like survival and more like actual living. The girls bloomed like the flowers. Anna grew 3 inches and started asking questions about everything. Why the sky was blue, how birds flew, what made rocks different colors. Caleb answered what he could, made up the rest, and she seemed satisfied either way. Ruthie started talking more. Not a lot, just small things. Good morning, when she woke up. Thank you, when she was given food. Her name when asked. But it was progress. Each word was a step back toward being a child instead of a ghost. She still hoarded food sometimes, still had nightmares, still went very quiet when strangers appeared. But she also laughed now, played, drew pictures of the cabin and the mountains and her family. Her family. That's what they were now. Eliza stopped working herself to exhaustion. Caleb had to tell her 3 times that she didn't need to earn her place before she believed him. Even then, she still worked hard, but differently, with joy instead of desperation, like she was building something instead of paying rent on her existence. She'd started a garden that put Caleb's half-hearted attempts to shame. Rows of vegetables, herbs she'd ordered from a catalog, flowers she'd planted just because they were pretty. She spent hours there teaching the girls about soil and seeds and patience. Caleb caught her singing one afternoon, quiet, to herself, something her mother had taught her. He stood in the doorway, listening, and thought about how silence used to be all he had, how he'd thought that was enough. What a fool he'd been. Town stopped gossiping eventually. They had new scandals to focus on, new people to judge. Caleb and Eliza became just another family. Normal, boring, exactly what they wanted. Reverend Michaels stopped by once a month to check on them. Caleb tolerated it because Eliza asked him to. The preacher had stopped being a threat and become just a nosy old man who liked to feel important. The girls are thriving, Michaels observed one afternoon, watching Anna and Ruthie play in the yard. They are, Eliza agreed. And your marriage? It's solid? Caleb gave him a flat look. That a question or an accusation? Just a question. I like to know my flock as well. We're not your flock. We're people who live on a mountain and occasionally attend your church. Michaels smiled. Fair enough. But you're happy? Caleb looked at Eliza, who was trying not to laugh at his expression. Yeah, he said, we're happy. And it was true. Not the kind of happiness that came from romance novels or fairy tales, not perfect or uncomplicated or smooth, but real. Built from hard choices and harder work and the decision to keep showing up for each other even when it was difficult. One evening in late July, after the girls were asleep, Caleb and Eliza sat on the porch watching the stars come out. I was thinking, Eliza said. About? About what we're building here. About the future. What about it? I want to make it official. The girls, I mean. I want you to legally adopt them. Caleb turned to look at her. You sure? I'm sure. They call you father. They think of you as their father. Might as well make it legal. So if anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. None of us know that. But if it does, I want them to be yours. Protected. Safe. Caleb thought about that. About the weight of it. About two little girls who'd already lost so much, who'd learned to trust again, who looked at him like he could fix anything. All right, he said. We'll make it legal. Eliza leaned against him. Thank you. For what? For choosing us. For fighting for us. For being exactly who you are. A stubborn mountain hermit with questionable social skills? A good man who needed a family as much as we needed him. Caleb wrapped his arm around her, pulled her close, looked out at the mountains that had been his refuge and his prison and were now just home. You know what I realized? He said. What? I spent 6 years thinking Rebecca's death was the end of my life, that everything after was just existing, waiting to die. But I was wrong. How so? It wasn't the end, it was just a chapter, a hard one, maybe the hardest, but not the end. He looked down at her. You're the next chapter, you and the girls. And this chapter's better. Better than your first marriage? Different than my first marriage. Rebecca was young love, building dreams. This is... He paused, searching for words. This is rebuilt love, second chances. It's knowing what you can lose and choosing to love anyway. Eliza's eyes were wet. That's the most words I've ever heard you string together. Don't get used to it, she laughed, kissed him. Soft and sweet and permanent. Inside, one of the girls called out. Nightmare, probably. Eliza stood to go check, but Caleb stopped her. I'll go, he said. It was Ruthie, sitting up in bed, eyes wide, breathing fast. Caleb sat beside her. You're all right, just a dream. She looked at him. Don't go away. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? He thought about all the promises that had been broken to this child, all the people who'd left or died or failed to protect her. I promise, he said. I'm staying right here. Me and your sister and Anna. We're all staying. Forever? As close to forever as we can get. She studied his face like she was deciding whether to believe him. Then she nodded, lay back down, closed her eyes. Caleb sat there until her breathing evened out, until she was asleep again, safe in dreams that maybe didn't hurt anymore. When he came back to the porch, Eliza was still there, waiting. She okay? She asked. Yeah, just needed to know we're not leaving. We're not. I know, but she needed to hear it. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountain. Somewhere an owl called. Wind moved through the pines. Water ran in the creek, swollen with snowmelt. You ever regret it? Eliza asked. Answering that advertisement? Taking us in? Caleb thought about that. About the months of chaos and fear and fighting. About the money spent and the peace disrupted and the life he'd had before. No, he said. Not even a little? Not even a little. Why not? He looked at her in the starlight. This woman who'd arrived terrified and desperate and had somehow become essential. Who'd brought noise and complications and life back into his world. Because you saved me too, he said simply. She didn't ask what he meant, didn't need to, just took his hand and held it while the mountains settled around them and the stars wheeled overhead and their family slept safe inside walls that had stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like home. Years later, Anna would write about this time in a journal she kept. She'd write about arriving in the snow, half-starved and terrified. About a man who could have sent them away but didn't. About her sister who refused to give up. About Ruthie finding her voice again. About becoming a family not through blood but through choice. She'd write that sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving too. That families can be built from broken pieces. That home isn't a place you're born into, but something you create with people who choose to stay. She'd write that her father, because that's what Caleb was, legal papers or not, taught her that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. About standing up to men with guns and papers and power because some things are worth fighting for. And she'd write that her sister Eliza taught her that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, about working hard and making choices and building something real from whatever materials you have. But that would be years later. Right now, she was just 8 years old, sleeping in a bed that was hers in a cabin that was home, with a sister who loved her and a father who'd chosen her and a future that looked nothing like her past. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The mountains settled into the rhythm of summer, into the pattern of days filled with work and laughter and the small dramas of family life. Arguments about chores and lessons, celebrations over Ruthie's first full sentence, Anna's first successful hunting trip, Eliza's garden producing more food than they could eat. Normal things. Human things. The things Caleb had thought he'd never have again. One afternoon in August, he was fixing the roof, a board had come loose in a storm, when he heard horses. His hand went automatically to his knife, old instincts dying hard, but it was just the sheriff, riding alone this time. Caleb climbed down. Got more trouble for me? The sheriff dismounted, smiled. No trouble, just paperwork. He pulled documents from his saddlebag. Adoption papers. Judge Harrison signed them. Anna and Ruthie are officially yours now. Yours and Eliza's. Caleb took the papers with hands that weren't quite steady. Looked at the words that made it legal. That made them his daughters not just in practice, but in law. Thank you, he said. Thank Eliza. She's the one who pushed it through. The sheriff climbed back on his horse. You've got a good family there, Caleb. Don't take it for granted. I won't. After the sheriff left, Caleb went inside. Eliza was teaching the girls to make bread, all three of them covered in flour and laughing. She looked up when he entered, saw his face. What is it? He held up the papers. It's official. They're ours. Anna looked at him. We're really yours? Forever? Forever. She ran to him, flower and all, wrapped her arms around his waist. Ruthie followed, quieter, but just as fierce. Eliza stood there watching, tears streaming down her face, smiling so wide it must have hurt. And Caleb Boone, who'd spent 6 years learning to live without people, who thought his capacity for love had died in a snowstorm with his first wife and unborn son, who'd answered an advertisement out of loneliness and gotten more than he'd bargained for. He held his daughters and looked at his wife and felt his heart, that stubborn muscle that had refused to quit despite everything, finally beat the way it was meant to. Full. Alive. Home. The mountains would always be hard. Winter would always come. There would be storms and struggles and days when survival was all they could manage. But they'd face it together, as a family, built not from ease or perfection, but from choice and work and the stubborn refusal to let the world tell them they didn't deserve this. And that, Caleb realized, was the point. Not the happy ending, not the perfect resolution. Just the decision to keep going, to keep choosing each other, to keep building something real from broken pieces. Some people are born into families. Others have to make them, have to fight for them, have to prove they deserve them, and then prove it again every single day. Caleb's family was the second kind. Hard-won, imperfect, real. And standing there in his cabin with flower-covered children and a wife who'd traveled across 3 states to save her sisters, with adoption papers that made it legal, and a marriage certificate that made it permanent, and a love that had grown from desperation into something stronger. Standing there, Caleb understood that some things are worth every bit of trouble they bring. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth choosing every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of a cabin that had once been a tomb and was now a home, as his daughters laughed and his wife smiled and the mountains stood watch over them all, Caleb Boone was finally, completely, undeniably at peace. Not because life was perfect, but because it was his, and that was enough.